So hello everyone. Welcome to our eighth and final class of this semester. It's crazy that we're already here, and we are now going to get into World War One and World War Two. And this is kind of a content-heavy unit. Both talking about both wars in one lecture is a lot because both wars had so many um, had so many factors, and unfortunately, we're not going to get to everything in about both wars in this lecture. And one such thing is the Holocaust, which was obviously a very, very difficult part of human history. So I really encourage all of you to research the Holocaust, kind of look things up. There is a lot of sensitive material as well, and it is all history, so we certainly have to look at that and look at how, what led to it and how we can prevent anything like that from happening again. And so, yeah, I highly encourage all of you to just do some research on the Holocaust, because we unfortunately are not going to be able to touch on it today, along with many other things. But I'm going to hit on some of the main points of both World War One and World War Two. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen with all of you, and alrighty. So. Um, Yeah, so America's involvement in World War One and Two. I say America's involvement because we are going to hit on America's involvement, and this course does put an emphasis on American history. But really, this is also going to be a broad overview of both wars. And as seen below, both wars had great impacts and helped shape the modern world. So here we are going to explore America's involvement and impact in World War One and World War Two, and all helped to shape modern world history. So, does anybody have any questions? If not, we will go ahead and get ready. And as always, if you have any questions, please reach out or leave something in the chat, or just say something, and I will try to answer that to the best of my ability. So, the beginnings of World War One. Obviously, we focus on World War One first, which took place between 1914 and 1918. World War One was also called the Great War, and this really got started with rising tensions in Europe, which were influenced by nationalism, militarism, and imperialism, which all led to this massive war, which became known as World War One. So in 1914, Europe was divided into two rival camps. You had the Triple Entity, which included Great Britain, France, and Russia, and then you had the Triple Alliance, which included Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. And yeah, so this division is definitely something to note, because you would start to this alliance system would start to form, which would almost have countries teaming with one another based on their values or their ideologies. And yeah, this is why it was kind of a world war. You had many countries, many powerful countries going against one another. So the war was really set off when Austria-Hungary declared a war against Serbia, and as a result, nearly every country in Europe helped to form this World War One. And it got its start officially when the heir to the Hungarian throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, he was assassinated by a Serbian by the name of Gavrilo Princip. And because the assassin was a Serbian, Austria decided to use the murder as an excuse to punish Serbia. So Austria presented Serbia with this agreement containing a list of demands, and Serbia, knowing that denying this agreement could lead to war, agreed to most of the demands, but not all of the demands. And since Serbia did not accept all of the agreements, Austria rejected Serbia's offer and declared war. um, on war against Serbia. And so Russia was an ally of Serbia. And this is where things kind of get a little twisted and confusing because this is when countries will start siding with one another for their own individual reasons. Russia, for instance, they were an ally to Serbia and took quick action by ordering the mobilization of troops toward the Austrian border. And so leaders all over Europe took notice, and the fragile European stability seemed ready to collapse into this armed conflict. So, in response to Austria's declaration of war, Russia began moving its army toward the Russian Austrian border. And expecting Germany to join Austria for certain reasons, Russia also mobilized along the German border. But to Russia, when Russia mobilized along the German border to possibly start attacking Germany, Germany thought that this was a declaration of war. So they declared war on Russia. So now you're having a lot of back and forth fighting, declarations of war all over the place. And since we're talking Europe, during this time, Europe was deeply fragmented. So things got a little bit confusing because these small countries were declaring war on other countries and forming and grouping together. So um, it's definitely kind of a confusing thing to get a hold of, but um, just know that there was a lot of grouping and a lot of declaration of war, with Germany kind of centered in the middle of this. And so Russia looked to its ally France for help after Germany declared war on Russia. And so Germany said, "Oh, okay, Russia, you're going to go look to get help from France. Well, we're going to declare war on France as well then." So soon after, Great Britain was kind of upset about all of this. So they said, "Okay, Germany, you're going to go after Russia and you're going after France. Well, guess what? We're going to go after you." So now Great Britain declared war on Germany. So I hope that you're understanding this all. Does anybody have any questions thus far? And if not, I will just go back to, let me see. Yeah, second slide. Okay. So by mid-August of 1914, this was the year the war, the year the war began, by the way, was 1914. The battle lines were clearly drawn. On one side was Germany and Austria-Hungary, who were known as the Central Powers because their location was in the center of Europe. Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire would later join the Central Powers because they hoped that if the Central Powers won, well, then they would regain lost territories. And then on the other side, you had Great Britain, France, and Russia, who were known as the Allied Powers or Allies. And the Allies you will hear again in World War II. The Central Powers, which was mostly Germany, the Central Powers would not be featured in World War II, but just know that the Allied powers would be featured in World War II, but with kind of some different countries. Why did someone kill Ferdinand is a question in the chat. Yeah, that I don't know the exact answer to. There were definitely tensions between Serbia and Austria-Hungary. So I just know that this assassin was a 19-year-old kid. I don't know if he was kind of a revolutionary or was really for his country, so he wanted to go and kill this Franz Ferdinand because he was trying to stir stuff up. But I know that Austria-Hungary used that assassination and said, okay, you have somebody assassinating the heir to our throne. Well, that must mean that you really don't like us and you want to go to war with us, so we're going to declare war on you. I don't know exactly, again, the reason why he was assassinated, but um, basically, Austria-Hungary took it as, oh, they don't like us, they're going to assassinate our people, and so we are going to take action against them. So yeah, again, this was not like an assassination attempt where you had military leaders of Serbia coming and killing the heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary. No, this was just a 19-year-old kid um, that could or could not have had motives. So I hope that answers your question, by the way. The important part there is that, again, that assassination to Austria-Hungary, that assassination was a declaration of war. So, good question, by the way. So, um, you have the other side. So we had just talked about the Central Powers, which was made up of Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire. And then you also had the Allied powers, which were made up of Great Britain, France, Russia, and then Japan and Italy would also join later on. And yeah, so right before we get started into right into the midst of the war, we first want to look at some of the advancements to military weapons that were brought on by World War One. These included poison gas, which was first introduced by the Germans and caused blindness and severe blisters or even death from choking. And poison gas was uh, used a lot in the trenches during trench warfare, which I'm sure you have seen before. We'll go over in a little bit. This is where these trenches were dug into the mud, and it was just a nasty and inhumane type of battle. And sometimes the opposing, let's say Germany, would throw poison gas into Great Britain's trench, causing everybody there to choke, and many eventually died. And kind of an interesting fact: Adolf Hitler, who was this fascist ruler of Germany in World War II, he would actually get poisoned by poison gas, but obviously he did not die from it. Um, so the machine gun it was another innovation and advancement in military weapons during World War One. And the machine gun would fire ammunition automatically and was greatly improved by the start of World War One. Yeah, the machine gun did not get its start in World War One. It was just it actually got its start in the 1880s in the United States, but become it would become very influential during World War One. They were used a lot. You could put a machine gun anywhere. You could put them on the back of a moving vehicle, or you could just plop them right in the middle of the trench and just go and fire on enemies. And the third military weapon innovation advancement was the tank, which was introduced by the British. And obviously, we know the tank, those big vehicles with a massive gun on it, and then it could take over territory because it had giant wheels and could tread through many different terrains. And then the fourth and final would be the submarine. And the submarine, you will hear, is going to be very influential um, and a big motivator in getting the United States involved in this war. Both in World War One and World War II, German submarines would help to influence the U.S. to get involved in World Wars One and Two. So this was first introduced by the Germans, and it used torpedoes to destroy enemies. Historically, the Balkans seem to be a place where conflict always happened. Um, Yes. So that I just got something in the chat that says historically the Balkans seem to be a place where conflicts always happened. Um, yeah. I mean, it's just it's kind of a central part. It's a central part of Europe, and you have many countries, intertwined through these areas and um, different terrain and it just you really look at the geography of a certain area, and that could also that paired with um, civilization developments, or country developments, um, and yeah, you would see a lot of conflict because you have these countries developing within these regions, and certain countries favor other countries and don't favor other countries. So that is a good point, though. And yeah, so this is Franz Ferdinand, who was the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, who was assassinated. So I believe this is the picture taken of him the day he was assassinated, and um, very similar to an American assassination later in the 20th century with John F. Kennedy. He would be in a this attempt happened in an open, moving uh, automobile. I don't think this is an automobile, by the way. I think that he's either in a car or a carriage. Anyway, um, and then here is kind of a map of Europe in 1914, and it shows the Allies as well as the Central Powers. So the Central Powers are pink, and then the Allies are this kind of this beige color. So as you can see here, the Central Powers are Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Turkey, or the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria as well. And you have so these are the Central Powers, sorry. And then your allies, you have France, Italy, Great Britain, and Russia. And then also some countries in Northern Africa. So in the midst of the war, so in the beginning, the war was fought on the Eastern and Western Front. So this means, when I say Eastern and Western Front, I mean to the east of Germany. Think Germany is right here. So to the east of Germany and to the west of Germany. So Germany, although very powerful, this was not an advantage. You had Russia, who did not like Germany, who was coming and attacking from here. Then you had Great Britain and France, who did not like Germany and were attacking from here. So Germany, yeah, was kind of was in the middle of this war. France would fight Germany on the Western Front, and Russia would fight Germany on the Eastern Front. And by early 1915, opposing armies on the Western Front had dug miles of parallel trenches to protect themselves from enemy fire. And this is what we had discussed earlier, it would become known as trench warfare. And the Battle of the Western Front would only gain France and Germany about 9 miles between the two, yet over 500,000 people would die. And that is an unfortunate um, situation that happens in war. You have two or more sides fighting for something, and they only get very little, yet many people usually die. And this was the case in both of these wars. You had many casualties, very sad. And this case, during the battle on the Western Front, again, both sides only gained 9 miles of territory. 9 miles, yet 500,000 people died. So just a very sad fact of the war. And although the Russians did have some success on the Eastern Front, they would still lose thousands of troops and be pushed out of Austria-Hungary. And they were pushed out of Austria, the Russians were pushed out of Austria-Hungary because Russia was not industrialized yet. As we had talked last class, industrialization, advancements in just so many different things, advancements in machinery, transportation, markets. This had swept all over Europe, but it had not reached Russia yet. So, Russia did not have the certain technologies and transportation systems in order to effectively fight, yet they did effectively fight because they had a very large population. So Germany and its allies, however, would actually become concerned with more than just the Eastern and Western front. And as this war raged on, fighting spread beyond Europe, and it actually spread into Africa and Southeast and Southwest Asia. And yeah, this kind of led to the notion that World War I would become much more than just a European conflict. New countries would get mixed in the war. You had the United States, you had Japan, you had Northern Africa, and you had China. So yeah, it's the war. It's definitely a world war. Let's just say. Um, and Australia, by the way, Australia and Japan would enter the war on the Allied side, while India supplied troops to fight alongside the British rulers. And yeah, India, so they really wanted to get involved. Gandhi, by the way, he was a huge influence in getting India involved with the war. But he had thought that, okay, we are going to get involved in this war. We are going to help our the country that controls us, Great Britain, and maybe if we help them out enough, they will grant us our independence. So this was a big motive for India to get involved in the war. Maybe if we supply troops, our own people, they will help us gain our independence. And meanwhile, the Ottoman Turks and later Bulgaria, as mentioned before, allied themselves with Germany and the Central Powers. So again, many countries saying, okay, we're going to fight alongside this side, or we're going to fight alongside this side. You had a lot of that during this war and World War II. So all the great powers looked for other allies around the globe to tip this balance, and they also sought new war fronts on which to achieve victory. So in 1917, a year before the war ended, the focus of the war shifted to the high seas as Germany intensified the submarine warfare that had raged in the Atlantic Ocean shortly after this war had begun. And in January of 1917, the Germans announced that their submarines would sink other ships without warning if any foreign ship came into certain territories. So, for instance, if an American ship came into a territory that was heavily occupied by German submarines, Germans basically told everybody, well, if that situation happens, we're going to blow up that ship. And this policy would become known as unrestricted submarine warfare. And they knew this policy might lead to war with the U.S. because Germany had killed U.S. citizens before sinking ships. But they decided to gamble. And soon after, German U-boats, they actually sank 3 American ships. And yeah, the U.S. did not like this at all, and they were about to declare war on Germany. It would take just one more little push for America to declare war on Germany, and this came when the U.S. intercepted a telegram stating that Germany stating that Germany would help Mexico reconquer the land it had lost to the United States if Mexico would indeed ally itself with Germany. And on April 2nd, 1917, President Wilson asked Congress to declare war on Germany. He said, okay, you're going to destroy our ships and you are going to try to get Mexico to take American land. Well, you cannot do that. We're declaring war. And the U.S. would actually officially enter the war on the side of the Allies, which again was made up of Great Britain and France. And in May of 1918, the Germans sought to take control again. They said, "Okay, U.S. is coming into this war. We are going to be greatly impacted because the U.S. would supply many, many troops." To the Allied powers. So Germany right away said, okay, we're going to try to take control. And this came after Russia also withdrew from the war. The German military, however, during this time also was weakened. And in the summer of 1918, the Allies and Germans clashed at the Second Battle of Marne. The Allied forces, who were aided by 2 million U.S. troops, began to advance towards Germany. And soon after, the Central Powers began to crumble. The Central Powers, they took a gamble by messing with the United States, and the United States entered the war, decided to throw in millions of troops and millions of dollars of weapons. And this would actually eventually lead to the decline of the Central Powers and the end of World War I. So first the Bulgarians and then the Ottoman Turks would surrender. Then in November of 1918, Germany declared itself a republic. France and Germany would sign an armistice agreement to stop the fighting. And on November 11th, 1918, World War I came to an official end. Okay, so here, by the way, is trench warfare, and I'm sure you have seen this before. You just dig these underground, and this is a very shallow trench. Some of these trenches can be extremely deep, and we're talking like 10 feet deep, where people are standing in the trenches, yet they can still see this right here, like the edges of the trench. So yeah, this is trench warfare. Very, very scary ways of fighting. And then this is, this is a bus in Britain, by the way. I think this is in London after World War I came to an end. So people celebrating, obviously, since this is in Britain, these are the Allied powers who won the war, so they're celebrating this victory. So I know that was a lot. Does anybody have any questions about World War I? I'll come back to the main screen. Does anybody have any questions? And if not, we will get into World War II. As always, just please let me know. One comment. China was. Sorry, I saw something in the chat, and then it was gone. Okay, so one comment I'm getting is China was a nominal victory country in World War I. It said China sent a lot of workers to Europe. Yeah, see, that's a good point. I had very briefly mentioned China, and when I was kind of preparing and reading, getting everything ready for this, there was actually very small amount of information on China. And also I wanted to kind of just give a broad overview, but that is a good point. China was very influential in World War I and also in World War II. And just on a side note too, I don't talk about China too much. Obviously, China, I am so very interested in the country. I love the rich culture and history of China, something that I have studied and hope to and will continue to study. I have tried not to talk too much about China. Not not I'm not giving it. I'm trying to give it its credit too, but I know that you all have received a lot of education about China, so I've really wanted to introduce some new things. Um, but yeah, that is a good point. China was again very influential in World War One, and yes, did help a lot with in Europe. So thank you for that comment. I will now get into um, World War Two. Again, these are a lot of information. So, and excuse me just a second. So, World War II. This one's a very long. I cannot tell you how many documentaries I have watched on World War II, and many of which are many hours long. So I encourage you to go to YouTube and look up World War II documentaries and just watch, or in World War One documentaries, because there is a lot of interesting information. I know the History Channel and National Geographic have two really interesting documentaries on World War II. Um, so let's get into this. And World War II, by the way, it started in 1939 and ended in 1945. So it took place about 21 years after the end of World War One. So during the 1930s, Adolf Hitler played on the hopes and fears of Western democracies. After signing a non aggression pact with the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin at the time, Hitler moved ahead with his plans to conquer Poland. And this is where World War II got its beginnings, was over whether or not Germany should have invaded Poland. And there was an obvious agreement where Germany was not supposed to go after Poland. No one was supposed to go after Poland, yet Germany decided to attack and capture Poland. And this caused conflict. Um, so Germany rumbled across the Polish border and began bombing parts of Warsaw, which is Poland's capital. And in response, France and Great Britain would declare war on Germany, and this would be in September of 1939. Poland, because Germany really was not supposed to go after Poland, yet they did go after Poland. If you capture is a capture, Germany would 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 now annex the western half of Poland. And so after they declared war on Germany, the French and the British had mobilized their armies. And in April of 1940, Hitler launched the surprise invasion of Denmark and Norway, which the Germans would capture. And the Germans then began to build bases along the Norwegian and Danish coasts from which they would launch strikes on Great Britain. So Germany had a lot of strategic military plans during World War II. They, they would capture. They obviously were out to capture multiple territories, and they would stop at nearly nothing to do that. And yeah, it was just really interesting to think about because they would go and capture certain areas and then use those areas as their advantage to capture other areas. So they had, these plans all worked up or all marked, ready to go, all drawn up. And this was a perfect example when they would build these bases along the Norwegian and Danish coasts in order to get to Great Britain. And Germany during World War II would try to go after Great Britain quite a bit. And really, Britain had somebody by the name of Winston Churchill, who was there prime minister, and Winston Churchill really motivated Britain to resist German attacks, and this would prove to be very successful. So in May of 1940, Hitler began a dramatic sweep through the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg in order to strike at France. So now Britain's saying, okay, we're going to go after Germany, or not Germany, Great Britain. Now let's go after France too. And by June of 1940, the Germans had taken Paris and French leaders had surrendered. So here you have Germany trying to go after Great Britain. They would end up failing at capturing Great Britain. They would not be able to do that, but they would be able to capture France. And yeah, so the Germans, after capturing France, they went back to Britain. They're now trying to attack Britain again. But due to the British resistance by Winston Churchill, Hitler would actually call off his attacks and focus now on Mediterranean and Eastern Europe. So yeah, he saw Britain did really a good job at resisting German attacks, and Hitler said, "Oh, we're not going to be able to capture Britain right now. Let's go after different areas." And by the way, just so I can clear this up, the Allied powers would be made up of Great Britain, France, China, the United States, and Soviet Union. So, like the Allied powers in World War I, Great Britain is back, France is back, China is back, the US is back, and the Soviet Union is back. The Axis powers, Germany would be there, Japan would be there, and Italy would be there. So, yeah. So, Hitler would also try to take over the Soviet Union, which he almost succeeded in capturing because they were able to take over Leningrad very quickly. And when German forces set their sights on Moscow, which is the capital of no, I'm sorry, I'm getting my things mixed up. So they would try to go after Moscow. I'm forgetting if Moscow, I think, is, yes. So Moscow is the capital of Russia. So German forces try to go after Moscow, which is the capital, and they would have to retreat though as temperatures fell, and the Germans had already lost 500,000 lives in Russia. And this takes us back to the flashback of Napoleon, the French leader Napoleon, who tried to take over Russia as well, but due to lowering temperatures, he actually had to retreat. Same thing happened here. And so America would enter this war for a similar reason as World War I. So most Americans felt that the United States should not get involved in the war whatsoever, although President at the time, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, knew that if the Allies fell, the United States would eventually be drawn into the war anyway. So in September of 1939, President Roosevelt asked Congress to allow the Allies to buy American arms. So America would be aiding the Allies with weapons, and the Allies would pay cash and then carry the goods to their ships. This is all that would happen. America would not be deploying troops. They would just be giving, for a price, they would be giving weapons to the Allies. But then, in September of 1939, a German U-boat fired on a U.S. destroyer in the Atlantic. And so in response, Roosevelt ordered Navy commanders to shoot German submarines on sight. And so the U.S. was, really starting to get involved here. But so similar to in World War I, This was due to the fact that German U-boats are attacking American American citizens or American vessels. But that was not the primary reason America got involved in World War II. This had to do with Japan, and the Japanese would be the country to draw the United States into the war. And this was due to the attack on Pearl Harbor, which happened on December 7th, 1941. So the Japanese hoped to catch European colonial powers and the United States by surprise. So early in the morning on December 7th, 1941, American sailors at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Pearl Harbor, by the way, is an American naval base in America's 50th state of Hawaii. And on December 7th, 1941, these soldiers arose to explosives, and the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor. So within 2 hours, the Japanese had sunk or damaged 19 ships and more than 2,300 Americans were killed. The next day, President Roosevelt addressed Congress and requested for a declaration of war on Japan and its allies, and this would be granted. So while the Allies were dealing with issues on the home front, they were also preparing to push toward victory in Europe. And similarly to World War I, once America entered the war, the Axis, they, they open their eyes and they say, okay, America's coming back. America's very powerful. We're either going to have to change it up, or this war is going to come to a close very quickly. So now we get into the midst of World War II. So in 1943, the Allies began secretly building an invasion force in Great Britain. They were planning on launching an attack on German-held France across the English Channel. So again, even though France is started off as an ally in World War II, they would be captured by Germany. So now Germany has control of France. So by May of 1944, the invasion force was ready, and General Dwight D. Eisenhower, who would later become the President of the United States, he was the commander of this giant fleet in Normandy. And he planned to strike on the coast of Normandy in northwestern France. And the Germans knew that an attack was coming, but they didn't know where it would be launched. And so this became codenamed Operation Overlord, and the invasion of Normandy and still today, is the largest land and sea attack in world history. And the invasion would become known as D-Day. D-Day just celebrated its 75th anniversary a few years back, in which people from my school actually got to go to Normandy and see the exhibit and celebrate D-Day. And so, something in the chat: why during World War II did the majority of German people accept the beliefs? Sorry, I'm getting sorry. See something in the chat. So, the question: why during World War II did the majority of German people accept the beliefs of Hitler, feel proud of being Nazis, or even support the Holocaust to the Jewish? Do people learn the lessons from World War I and World War II to prevent such tragedies from happening again? And so this is very sad, and this is a good. Here, I'll take it off screen share. So this is a very interesting thing, especially in regards to human psychology. Why did people support these inhumane acts of the Germans and all of the Axis powers during this time? And really, you can't really describe it. I mean, the many people who believed that the Holocaust was you know proper, or these attacks were proper. Um, there's no excuse for that thinking. This was inhumane stuff, things that should never happen to any human being, and but I think some people came forward to say, well, it could have been because we had said, okay, these are the things we have to do in order to keep our country powerful. That's kind of a certain argument. Obviously, that's not a good argument, or an effective, or even a factual argument. There's no reason why stuff like this should happen, but they would accept the beliefs of Hitler because Hitler was a grand communicator, and he would go and say, okay, we're going to make our country very powerful. We have to do this and this and this and capture these territories and suppress these people in order to make our country the most powerful country on earth. And obviously he was just leading these citizens to believe in false things. So, do people learn the lessons from World War I and World War II to prevent such tragedies from happening in the future? This is, yes. I mean, many people have learned from this. I don't think um, an act like the Holocaust will happen again. Obviously, there is still suppression happening throughout the world. You have, even in America, you have a lot of civil unrest from the treatment of minority groups, which is very disappointing and very sad. So we're obviously still learning from things like this. And, hopefully one day our world will become more unified, and really we will just grow from this. So I hope that answers your question, by the way. Again, there's no excuse for people believing in Hitler's ideologies, but Hitler would preach some false stuff to them, saying that, okay, if we do this and this, then we will be the most powerful country on earth. We are destined to be the most powerful country on earth. That's how God made us, something like that. And, obviously that's, again, not proper thinking. So here I'm going to share the screen again. So despite heavy losses during D-Day, the Allies would actually win this battle, this attack at Normandy, and they would march into Paris. And by September of 1944, the Allies had liberated France, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and they had their sights on Germany. So, yes, so sorry, I want to answer questions in the chat right away too, so I can get those. So another thing in the chat says, we ordinary people need to learn critical thinking without being influenced by any politician. Correct. That I hope that this you have learned that in this course, that by studying history, past events, using the historical perspective, thinking critically, and not just taking one person's beliefs as gold, but looking at many different beliefs and using critical thinking. That is how we can grow and definitely be the best that we can be in the world. So great point, by the way. Thank you. So let me make sure I'm sharing here. The Allies moved towards Germany from the west, and the Soviet army was advancing toward Germany from the east. So during the Battle of the Bulge, this would come right after D-Day, German tanks broke through American defenses and pushed into Allied lines. Despite this, the Allies would eventually push Germany back, and the Germans, would have to retreat. So after the Battle of the Bulge, the war in Europe would rapidly come to a close because the Allied powers were moving into Germany. They were looking to now capture the German capital of Berlin. And the Soviets would be the first to get there. They would surround the capital and begin pounding Berlin with artillery fire. And on May 7th, 1945, General Dwight D. Eisenhower accepted the unconditional surrender of the Third Reich from the German military. And on May 9th, the surrender was officially signed in Berlin. And after nearly 6 years of fighting between 1939 and 1945, the war in Europe had ended, but World War II was not yet over. So after Germany had surrendered, on the European mainland, everything was good. There was obviously rebuilding happening, but and a lot of sadness had come from World War II. So not everything was good, but the things had calmed down. But the next stop for the Allies was Japan. Japan was still attacking, and so President Harry S. Truman had to make the decision whether or not to use a powerful atomic bomb or an A-bomb in order to cause the Japanese to surrender. And so President Truman warned the Japanese, hey, if you do not surrender, we are going to have to hit you with a bomb. His exact words we're going to bring heavy rain from the sky. Basically mean we are going to bomb you if you do not surrender. And the Japanese did not reply to this warning. So on August 6th, 1945, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, killing between 70 and 80,000 people. And then 3 days later, on August 9th, the second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, killing 70,000 people. So Japan just lost 140,000 to 150,000 people, and so they finally surrendered to General Douglas MacArthur on September 2nd, 1945. And with Japan's surrender, the war had ended, and countries now faced the task of rebuilding a war-torn world. And that kind of concludes, excuse me. So to the left is the aftermath of the bombing of Hiroshima. And this killed many, many people, obviously, but many people were also killed after the bombing due to nuclear effects on the bodies. So this was the destruction of the nuclear weapon. Very sad, by the way, too, because these were many innocent people that were killed by this bomb. And then here is what a ship would have looked like on D-Day in Normandy, France, with the soldiers, they're all on this ship, and then boom, they rush to land and start attacking. So thank you very much. That concludes this lecture on World War I, World War II, and America's involvement in these wars. And right now I am going to go ahead and end the recording. Thank you all.